God's curses are a reversal or removal of his covenant blessings. I want you to think about this because really, realistically, where all creation started was in blessing. It was in a state of blessedness. He created a man and a woman. He put them in a garden that had everything, absolutely everything they needed. Absolute abundance. All these trees are yours for food. All this land is yours to rule and exercise dominion. Everything is yours. Be fruitful. And then it actually even says, he blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the face of the earth. It's all yours. Run, enjoy, have babies that they can enjoy. Eat till you're filled, full. It's all yours. Every ounce of it. But you can't eat from this one tree. And even in a place of blessedness, even in a place of blessing, they rejected everything else for the one thing they couldn't have. And they entered into a curse that looks much like the one that's promised to Israel. In fact, is the one promised to Israel. Scarcity, sickness, sword, shame, and separation. You will surely die, he told them. You're going to give up plenty. You're going to give up the preservation of God on your life. You're going to give up the peace and the harmony that he created. You're going to give up the honor and dignity of being his image bearer across all things, over all things. You're going to give it up. They're not even going to recognize you anymore. And by the way, you got to leave the garden. You've got to leave my presence. You've got to go into exile. This is Israel's Eden moment, right? Like this is the moment where they can either walk in God's blessings in the same way that Adam and Eve could, as another Adam. Like this is a continuation. As another Adam, they can walk in God's blessings, or they can reject them and receive the curses they deserve. And we know exactly what happened because we have the rest of history to look at. That they did exactly that. And they earned his curse. Now, where that leaves us today, where that brings us today is, well, then what hope is there? Think of all they had. God spoke to them from a mountain. Have you ever walked up to the base of a mountain and heard God speak from the top of it? Have you seen the fire and the smoke? Have you been led through the wilderness by a pillar of smoke in the day and a pillar of fire by night? Have you seen the clouds settle on a tabernacle that you know God's presence is clear? Have you ever seen a man come down from a mountain glowing because his face is radiating the glory of God? Have you ever lived your life and not had to buy new clothes and buy new shoes and not deal with swollen ankles? If you don't have swollen ankles, it's because you're young. You'll get swollen ankles. They're coming. But everything else we can all say no to. If they couldn't do it, what hope do we have? I mean, think of the weight it puts on us. If the whole thing is ours to carry, if I've got to remain faithful to this covenant, if I've got to keep every one of these laws and not miss any of those sacrifices, and I've got to do it all, what hope is there? What can be done? Enter Jesus. God sent his son to do all for us what we couldn't do. All the things we couldn't do, he sent him. Jesus earned the blessing and endured the curse so that now by faith in him we can receive God's eternal blessings. This is the reality of where we live today. Jesus was sent, he took on flesh, he dwelt among us, he lived a sinless life, he died a sacrificial death, and he rose in victory, defeating death and sin. This is what he did. He earned the blessing. He lived faithful every day of his life. He lived in accordance with the law. And the laws that they confronted him with and said, you're not obeying, they're their own laws. They were made up laws. They were additions to the law. But Jesus was faithful in every way to the law. He earned every one of these blessings. You go back and you read chapter 28, verses 1 through 14, and you will see over and over blessings that Jesus earned and deserved because he lived a life according to the law. And they despised him, and they rejected him, and they killed him. But that was no accident. That was no, oh, God looked away. It was purposeful so that he could endure the curse. He always intended to earn the blessing and then endure the curse so that we could then be forgiven by faith in him. Galatians 3:13, just listen, these words aren't on the screen, just listen to Galatians 3:13, where Paul is dealing with the contrast of how the law brings us under curse. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. He lived a sinless life. He earned the blessing, but he redeemed us. He brought us out from under that curse by becoming a curse for us. He endured that curse in our place and for our sin. And just to test it, I thought, well, let's just think. Did he really endure this curse of scarcity and sickness and sword and shame and separation? He absolutely did. Scarcity. 2 Corinthians 8:9, Paul writes, though he was rich, yet for our sake he became poor. He knew scarcity. He even said himself, I don't have a pillow to lay my head on. As he hung on the cross, one of his final statements was, I thirst. Sickness. Matthew, quoting from Isaiah, he took our illnesses and bore our diseases. 1 Peter, quoting that same passage, by his wounds we are healed. Sword, he was pierced for our transgressions. I mean, maybe he was in no actual, physical war, but when the Romans show up to arrest you, or the temple guard shows up to arrest you carrying swords, and then they nail you to a cross, as a rebel, as a person who's leading a rebellion against the king. And he ends up actually pierced by a spear as he hangs there to ensure he's dead. Shame? Did he know shame? He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Philippians 2:8. Hebrews tells us that despising the shame of the cross, he went to it anyway. He's beaten, he's spit upon, mocked and ridiculed. The whole idea of the purple robe being hung around him and a crown of thorns was absolutely to humiliate. And then his people stood there, oh, you helped all these other people? Help yourself now. Imagine. The idea of the crucifixion was one, to crush a person, to actually bring shame upon them. Did he know separation? You know, it was when I was preaching through Luke that this became extremely clear to me a few years ago. I think I called it out in some of the sermons, I don't know, but I remember thinking and watching from the moment that he enters into Jerusalem, he is surrounded by a mob of people. They're praising him, they receive him as a king, they're exalting him and praise him who comes in the name of the Lord, and they are so ecstatic, and they are worshiping him, and the Pharisees are threatened, and the Sadducees, the temple leaders, are threatened, and they're trying to trip him up, but he's every day teaching in the temple, and people are coming to him and longing to know him and be close to him, and he's healing people still, and he's doing these works. But the closer the crucifixion gets, the more alone he is. Think about the progression, where he's in the upper room with his disciples, his closest followers, and Judas is going to leave, so now we're down to 11. And they go out to the garden to pray, and he asks Peter, James, and John to stay and to come in deeper with him and pray with him, and then he goes a little bit deeper, and then they fall asleep, and he's found alone praying. To the point that the crowd comes in to arrest him, and all of his followers end up running away and hiding. And they sneak in, and they're trying to keep it secret later on when he's being tried in the high priest's home. But they're not standing up and defending him in any way. And then eventually you find him hanging somewhere between earth and heaven on this cross. And some of his last words are, Father, my Father, Father, my God, I'm sorry. My God, why have you forsaken me? And we know in his divine nature, Jesus is God, but in his humanity, somehow, some way, he's alone. In exile. Because of people like those in Israel, and because of people just like you and me. And Jesus doesn't say, hey, you know what, go to the law, conform yourself to the law. He says, come to me.